Hi everyone, it's Catelyn or Mrs. Cronall, and I'm here again today with the lovely Clare. I have to apologise for missing last week. That was down to a combination of Ophelia and just bad Wi-Fi service anyway in Ireland, so there was no way I was going to be able to stream from Ireland. I think I was probably aiming to do too much. But we'll still be on course to finish this, hopefully before Christmas. Hopefully nothing else will happen. I'm not going anywhere between now and then. And yeah, I'll just push everything a week forward. So I'll redo the schedule in the description box down below. And so thanks, Claire, for being so patient with that. Today we are discussing everything from Cat 4 to Bran 4 in A Game of Thrones, obviously. So that's chapter 18 all the way up to the end of chapter 24. And I was just saying to Claire, this definitely feels like the most plot-driven selection of chapters that we've done so far, especially starting off with Cat 4. And this chapter starts with Cat arriving in King's Landing, but she is very quickly double-crossed by the captain of the ship, who I think he tells Varys, but then Varys goes to Littlefinger, and Littlefinger kind of has Cat sent to him, and it kind of goes from there. So Claire, what did you have on Cat 4?
Well, just a couple of observations that I made, really. Again, this chapter isn't making me any less suspicious of Cat and Cat's motivations in the story thus far. Oh, it says on my screen, waiting for people to join video call. Are you still there? Hello?
Oh, am I back?
Hi.
What happened there? That was weird.
That was strange. Something came up on my
YouTube? I hope we're still on YouTube.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I don't know what happened there.
Came up on my screen saying waiting for people to. I thought you'd invited other people.
No. No, I don't like anyone else.
Well, we're still waiting for John. John, I'm sure, will turn up at some point.
Oh yeah. AU, please let us know if you're interested in jumping in at some point. Okay. So sorry, Claire, you were saying you were suspicious of Cat. Actually, it was probably Cat. That's who did that.
I reckon, yeah. But I mean, she just, again, this chapter doesn't make me feel any less suspicious. And there are immediate questions. You know, please feel free to jump in and correct me if I'm making massive assumptions here, where there's evidence in the text. I don't know whether I'm just glossing over this, but why? There's a couple of questions that I've got here. The first one is, why did she take a Tyroshi trading ship? Why didn't she just get a ship from the Manderleys? She was in White Harbour, and Manderley is a bannerman of the Starks. So why didn't she just turn up and say, I want one of the White Harbour fleet? So I don't understand why there's this cloak and dagger entrance into King's Landing. I mean, she's the wife of the Hand of the King. And her arrival just seems to be very I don't understand what it is about them being in King's Landing that puts them at risk.
Yeah, I don't understand that either. And I had the exact same question written down about the Tyroshi.
Yeah, I thought that was just me. I was like, there must be something really obvious here why they're going like deep undercover, and that there's a big risk of them being in King's Landing. Surely she can just walk straight in there and say, I'm Lady Stark, the wife of the Hand. I'm here to visit him. You know, I don't understand why there's all this. They both feel, her and what's the guy with the whiskers? Forgot his name already.
Roderick Cassell, is it?
Yes, yeah. He. You know, why do they both feel that she needs to be hidden? I don't understand.
I wondered. I think I mentioned this before with Cat. I wondered if there was some sort of like heightened sight, not necessarily green sight, but heightened instinct or something with the Tully women in particular. There definitely seems to be a lot of paranoia, especially when we get to her sister later. So
Yeah.
they seem to be uber paranoid, the two Tully girls. So maybe that's it. But I mean, they are going into a situation where they know, or she suspects John Arryn has been murdered, and now someone has tried to murder her son. So they'll have no problem taking her out if they need to. So I guess,
yeah,
in her head, I guess that's why. But I don't know why you would trust anyone not to sell that information.
Yeah, I mean that's that's high price information, and
yeah.
I just thought her arrival was it needn't be so dramatically cloak and dagger. I just didn't quite understand that, and also just again reading between the lines with Littlefinger. When she says, she's in a room and she's called for by Littlefinger and she thinks to herself, so soon. So she expects, it's almost like she expects to run into Littlefinger even before Ned. It's like, did she want to see Littlefinger? Did she expect to see Littlefinger before she saw Ned? It was that, so soon. I don't know, there's just something about that made me think,
that this may be a way of George kind of red flagging Cat as not being part of the North? Had she maybe been a northern wife of Lord of Winterfell, she maybe would have been able to go to, I don't know, someone like the Manderleys and got like transport from down to King's Landing. Like, why couldn't she go to a trusted house? It's not a treasonous act to try and sneak her into King's Landing. It's not like she's getting anyone into trouble. She could have just said, you know what, I really miss my husband. I kind of like the ride. Do you mind if you give me a little covert lift to my husband?
Yeah. I mean, she was already in White Harbour.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as if, they caught a Tyroshi trading ship at the White Knife or somewhere around the vicinity. She was in White Harbour, so why not commandeer a Manderley ship?
Or just ask. But maybe that's just showing. I always feel Cat feels she's above anybody in the North. Like she's married into the savages almost, in a way. So, and it's very interesting that she'll be contrasted with Dany later on, who actually feels like she's becoming a much better leader and person because she's married into the so-called savage class. Cat, it does show her political acumen in some ways, because she, as you said, she knows Littlefinger's going to come to her eventually. But it shows weakness there that will kind of just follow her throughout her arc, right? That she just completely underestimates people all the time, especially lower class people.
Yes, there is that air of, do you know who I am? And I'm not accustomed to being treated like this. There's definitely that air of superiority from Cat. It was interesting when she was recalling Littlefinger as a boy at, where he was a ward at River Run. And the way that she remembered Littlefinger, and I thought, I bet she treated Littlefinger better than she treated John, as a kind of like ward or a bastard kind of figure. And then it just, the only thing really that I've got is they obviously know each other very well. In fact, Littlefinger says, I know you too well. And when they're talking about because Cat's very surprised that Varys seems to have these skills of being able to find information so quickly. And before Varys arrives and Littlefinger's talking about him, and she says, does Littlefinger know about? And then it's like ... there's a knock at the door. And it's just, and I've just put what does, in my notes, what does Varys know about what? And Littlefinger's saying, I know you too well.
And then she says he did know her too well. I actually wrote that line.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do still think that, again, linking back to them thinking about the Tully words in this chapter, family, duty, honour, and I just think family is Tully, duty is the mission, and honour is to keep the mission a secret. So I still don't know what the mission is, but I do think it links to those words. Family, duty, honour is Tully's. The duty is she's got a duty to fulfill some kind of mission on behalf of her family, but there's also an honour there about keeping it secret. And this links into something that Ned says a little bit later on about lies and secrets and things. But there's definitely something, I think there's a rich history there between Littlefinger and Cat, going back to their childhood, that is not revealed or even maybe alluded to that much in the books. But I do think that there's something there. He knows her very well. She thinks about seeing Littlefinger before she even thinks about meeting up with Ned in King's Landing. And I just think, like I said, there's nothing about this chapter that makes me feel any less suspicious of Cat's motivations. And I think you're absolutely right. She does see the North as some kind of like savages that are beneath her. So
I just wondered, was Littlefinger a bit of a plaything for her? Maybe like sexually and psychologically? Because I know later Littlefinger kind of brags about sleeping with Cat, or is that just the show? I can't remember. I think it's in the book.
Yeah, it's in the book.
And I always wondered, did they fool around? Did they do something more than, you know, because maybe like, young kids and they were just like experimenting and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's the way she thinks about Littlefinger. Yeah, I don't know. It's either incredibly naive or, yeah, I don't know what to make of it. I mean, because of Littlefinger later on, she will never see her girls again. Like, she'll never see her husband again. So, yeah, like he's the one that convinces in Ned's chapter. He'll be the one to convince them to leave Sansa and Arya in King's Landing, not send them back home with Cat.
Yeah, she doesn't even mention her daughters. Again, there doesn't seem to be that.
Well, Ned wants them to go, and Littlefinger says no. So it's like Littlefinger is keeping her children. And well, she doesn't seem to be too...
No, well, if we go by what she said in earlier chapters, that she'd let them go in her heart.
Yeah.
Just very strange, very strange. That's pretty much all I've got really on that chapter.
The only other thing that I liked about this chapter is the fact that our first description of King's Landing does come from Cat and an outsider.
Yeah.
It's quite impressive. And we'll get that in the next chapter with Jon and the Wall. And I kind of like that kind of idea of really intricate world building. The other thing I liked about this is that we meet Littlefinger and Varys through Cat. We meet them both at the same time. So we're not getting like they're going to be so instrumental throughout this series. I think it's really interesting that he presents them both at the same time. It's like these two are equally important. He's not like giving one favor over the other. And her description of Varys is really creepy. His flesh was soft and moist, and he had lilac smelling breath. It's really creepy.
Like an old lady.
Yeah, I wondered what the lilac smelling breath was. I don't know what that is, but maybe he's taking something or But overall, the other thing, the interesting thing here is we find out about the knife with Tyrion, and that Cersei lost her emerald the same day in the same bet, but that she got her emerald back.
Yeah.
So, which kind of made me question, it's another complicated layer in Cersei and Tyrion's relationship, that she was able to get that emerald back. It's like, I don't know, there's just something there. There's a very strong love-hate relationship with Cersei. But that was it for Cat 4. So Jon 3 then, and this is chapter 19. This is a really densely packed chapter. I feel like there's so much happening. So I'm just going to read just very quickly what happens, a quick summary of this chapter, just to kind of remind everybody what happens here. So we quickly learn that Jon is the best of the new recruits at the Wall, but it isn't going down very well with the other recruits, and doesn't seem to be going down very well with Sir Alistair either, who's training them all. And Dol Noy gives him a kind of a wake-up call as to his arrogance and how that's hurting his position in the Night's Watch. And he also gets some good news from Winterfell about Bran, and he runs to tell Tyrion first and lifts him up and throws him up in the air and is all excited. But before that, Tyrion assumes that Bran is dead. And he also, throughout the chapter, appreciates Tyrion's honesty, particularly in being the only one to tell him about how bad the Wall is, and wonders why his father didn't do that. And we all wonder that as well, because we never got a Ned Jon moment in the books. And he, at the end of this chapter, he makes a lifelong enemy of Alistair Thorne, just as he is winning over Gren and the other guys. So there's kind of a lot happening for Jon's character. I feel like he does a lot of he goes through changes here, which I feel is very kind of realistic for somebody of that age, to be given lessons and try to take them on board as quickly as possible. Unlike Kat in the previous chapter, who is just stubborn and won't learn anything new and just goes with her own instincts. Suddenly we get Jon, who's behaving like a bit of a privileged brat, and when he's told that's not good enough, he starts taking on board. So yeah, that's definitely George setting up Kat and Jon as being ultimately in conflict with each other, I think. So yeah, sorry, that was a long chapter though. I felt there was a lot happening in that chapter.
There was, but I didn't really make too many notes. It is interesting that it is Jon's first full chapter at the Wall, so we do get a little bit about the backstory and the history of the Wall as well. So we find out that it did originally have 5,000 men. There's now just, I think, probably a few hundred. There are 19 towers across the Wall, which is, I think it's, and they never really give us the expanse and the scope of this in the TV show, but it's actually like 300 miles long, the Wall, from end to end. Like geography, I'm just thinking that's actually further in miles than it is from Manchester to London.
Yeah,
that's a huge structure across. I mean, it gives you an idea as well of the size of the continent of Westeros.
It would be at the most narrow part in the north, right? Way in the north. Yes. It's not like a wide part of the north. It's quite a narrow part.
Yeah, it's kind of bottles in a little bit before you get to the lands of always winter, but it's huge. It's an enormous structure, and just thinking about how long 300 miles are, you've got 19 towers across the Wall, and only 3 of them are effectively being manned at the moment. So Eastwatch, the Shadow Tower at the extreme ends of the Wall, and then you've got Castle Black somewhere in the middle, which is predominantly where most of the action takes place in the books, is at Castle Black. We find out that Jon is now 15, so he's had a birthday recently, and he's now turned 15. So already, even just on the 3rd chapter, there's definitely an advance of the characters. We get to meet Mormont's Raven. And I know that on like the wiki of Ice and Fire and the forum, the Westeros.org forum, there are pages and pages dedicated to the language of the crows and the words that he says in sequence. So I made a note that the first words that we hear him say are corn, corn, and live, live. So they're the first 2 words that the bird speaks. There are just little nuggets like this, like, you know, the stories that old Nan tells us, what the crow says, some of the weird things that Patchface says later on when we meet Patchface. But yeah, I just thought it was quite interesting that this is the first introduction. Also, the description of the wall itself as being blue, and you know, when the light shines at it at certain angles, you can see it weeping, but it also looks blue. And my notes are just wall is blue, blue equals ice magic, and it's like, so maybe the reflection of the blue is a reflection of the magic, the ice magic that was used to build a wall, which kind of leans more towards the men didn't make the wall. Maybe it was, you know, the proponents of ice magic that made the wall because of this blue sheen. But yeah, that's really all. I mean, I felt that Benjen earlier on in the chapter seemed to be like even more extra dismissive of Jon, which was really strange.
About Ned as well, like, you know, I'll always have a place in my heart for my brother, but these are my brothers now. It's like, oh,
yeah. I mean, and I know it's like setting Jon up for this is, you know, this is what you've signed up for, this is what it's all about, but I just felt that he was, it just seemed as though he was being extra shitty with Jon. And I couldn't really work out quite why, to the extent that Jon kind of flippantly imagines Uncle Ben's death and disappearance. It kind of feels like he takes on that guilt of kind of imagining that into reality.
Do you think?
And it's like, oh, I wonder if there's something there. I wonder if there's something, you know, he's kind of willed for something horrible to happen.
Do you think the Starks, anyone with Stark blood, maybe paternal Stark blood in particular, they harden as they get to the wall? Like they become more emotionally cold, because they know what, or I don't know. There's something I can understand like Ben needing to make a complete switch personality wise because men look up to him and stuff like that, but it seems to be a bit more than that for Jon. I don't know, there's something about, like, as we get into the history, I suppose the history will slowly unravel or like reveal itself about the Starks and their connection with the North, and what the Starks, the kind of things that most Starks got up to in the past aren't the kind of things that our current batch of Starks would ever dream of doing. You know,
no,
kind of
I mean, they were horrible, the Kings of Winter. Yeah. Brutal.
So I don't know, there's something, are they affected in some way by the ice magic in a way that maybe other people aren't? I don't know, maybe I'm just...
Maybe, and there's always got to be a Stark at Winterfell as well. Maybe that has a different meaning of, like, you know, if you have, because Mel has more, later on in the books, Mel has more power at the wall where the magic is. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the opposite for the Starks, and maybe they get their strength from their proximity to Winterfell, similar to how the Stark children seem to get strength and sort of strong will from being in close proximity to their direwolves.
Yeah.
And maybe that is something about, you know, there must be always be a Stark at Winterfell.
What I always find ironic about Jon's chapters, and perhaps Kat is the only other person that I can think of that would definitely fall into this category, Arya maybe as well, but no, not Arya, just Kat and Jon for now. I find Jon's chapters are so magical. Like they don't, like he doesn't spend any time kind of pondering anything that's anyway mystical. He even says in this thing that he doesn't pray to gods. He doesn't do anything like that. Kat does that. So it's interesting how spiritual and magical his chapters are, considering who we think he is and what prophecy is surrounding him as a person. And all of this might be building to a big reveal for his character in the next book, Winds of Winter, obviously. But yeah, like it's when we get to Tyrion's chapter, I feel like we get much more sense of the magic and the mystery around the wall. For Jon, it's like the numbers of it, and it's just the sheer kind of physical object that it is. And I just find that that's it's quite nice to see it from Jon's point of view, but it's not until you're really with someone like Tyrion that you're going to get the actual magical stuff, because I don't think Jon really cares about that stuff, and he doesn't seem to be tuned into that stuff at all.
No.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things that I loved his description of the wall, like that some days he didn't think of it like the way you have the sky overhead or the earth underneath your foot, but other days it's the only thing he can think of.
Yeah.
And it's just one of the most I feel like it's one of the most amazing fantasy elements that have ever been created, this idea of the wall. And I know that's like where the whole series kind of started for George. I didn't really have anything else here either. Only for him saying that he can feel the weight of the wall, and says, and really feels like if the wall falls, the world will fall, and very quickly is very aware of that. And I feel like Jon just can't relax. He's like, he's always, it's almost like he's geared, that he's always been kind of set to be in this position. Like you don't get the feeling that any other of the guys around him feel that way. Even like maybe Mormont, but none of the other guys have that feeling of the weight of the wall, the way Jon seems to have it. But yeah, so yeah, that was all I have as well. I don't think there's anything else. Just just Jon feels very at home there.
I mean, it's just, you know, the physically imposing structure, and it kind of parallels the foreboding of the, you know, the weight of responsibility that he's going to be bearing later on. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think he doesn't really think of, even though they're talking about the others and the White Walkers and the history behind, you know, I think it's not seen as a magical thing, whether to be, you know, from Tyrion's point of view, it's almost like an amusing thing, or Grumpkins and Snarks, these magical beings, ha ha ha. But for Jon, it's just like, well, whether they're magical or not, it's just the enemy. It's there. So it's a very kind of pragmatic, practical, military sort of leadership kind of response.
He feels like people have been pushing against him all his life, so it's almost like he just wants something to instantly push it back against himself. And you know, Noy is right to try and stop him and say, look, you can't do this to guys that were born to pig farmers and that were born bastards in way worse circumstances than you,
and that have never picked up a weapon before, whereas you've had training from like the Master of Arms, Castle Forge Steel, etc., etc. And you're saying that these boys are bullying you. It's just, I mean, it's not difficult to see why how Jon is described as like a real typical emo teenager at the wall, and we get a glimpse of that here in his first chapter.
Yeah, and I almost wish somebody would give the same lesson to Cat.
Yeah.
Like, it's so nice the way those two chapters come back to back. But so then so that's the and obviously making a lifelong enemy with Alistair is like a big no-no. And like, we only meet him in this chapter, and we already know from the beginning of the chapter, you do not want this guy to work against you. And of course, by the end of this chapter, that's exactly what Jon has set up for himself. So the next chapter is chapter 20, and it's an Ed chapter. I think this is the last time in our reread that we're only going to have one Ned chapter. I think from now on, I think we'll have at least two for every section. Ned's chapter, you can already feel his plot is going to start propelling. Like, it's already starting to speed up a little bit. And quite a lot happens politically kind of in this chapter. A lot is revealed politically, plot-wise. He arrives in King's Landing and meets with the small council almost straight away. And he discovers, much to his own horror, that Robert's reign has basically landed Westeros in, or the crown at least, in a horrific amount of debt, mainly to lots of people, but mainly to Tywin Lannister, which horrifies Ned. And Littlefinger has a surprise for him. And Littlefinger, obviously, that surprise is Cat. And Ned is filled in on everything that's happening with Bran and with the knife and all that kind of thing. So yeah, this is one of those chapters where I kind of wish I had somebody else's perspective in the room as well. Maybe Kat's perspective in particular in this room. His description of some of the people around the table at small council is also quite interesting. The fact that Littlefinger already seems to have this kind of playful relationship. Sorry, Claire, I was just saying about the small council, his description of the small council. Littlefinger seems to have this kind of insider joke thing going on with Renly. Now knowing what we kind of suspect and know about their relationship, it is very much like there's something else going on with those two for sure. Stannis not being there is a massive red flag for Ned. And in hindsight, it's a massive red flag for all of us. Not being there, that's a big deal. But of course, for Ned, the biggest deal is the fact that Robert doesn't bother his arse showing up. And if that was me, I'd be like, no, I'm not doing it. Here's your hand. I'm going back home.
Yeah.
This is. I'm not here to be king.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think Ned probably had some kind of an idea that it was going to be. I'm surprised that he's surprised that Robert hasn't turned up and that he just wants to get on with, whoring and feasting and, it doesn't. I think it's more he's given Ned the impression that there are matters of the realm to be discussed and that that he's present and is involved in this kind of these political machinations, but he's not. And I don't think it's a surprise as a reader to find out that Robert's just not interested at all in any of this. He's just,
Robert couldn't do
an excuse for another tournament.
Robert couldn't pivot to become more regal just because he won the throne.
Yeah.
I mean, why does Ned think, even he ends this chapter saying he hopes Robert is the man he knew or he knew before or something. And it's like, but you didn't know this man. You knew the boy, and he hasn't really changed that much, Ned. He's not. Yeah. He's he's very selfish. I mean, this is the guy that basically started a war across the kingdom because someone else stole his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Kidnapped his girlfriend, but still, it's just he didn't really do it for any kind of. He didn't do it because the Targaryens were tyrannical. He did it because they stole his girl. I don't know why Ned has this kind of. I don't know where he gets this idea that Robert could ever be regal or responsible. I mean, as soon as he hears how much debt, the Targaryens had loads of money left. So as soon as he hears how much debt the crown is in, he should be there saying, right, either I'm going home or, we need to deal with, we can't appeal to Robert as a logical person anymore.
Yeah. It, I mean, immediately he felt as though he didn't belong in the small council, and that must have been, it just must have been horrible to find out that, especially about the debt and who was owed. So the Tyrells are owed money, the Tyroshi are owed money, the Lannisters are owed money, and now they're having this ridiculous tournament.
Yeah, the tournament.
Yeah.
How exciting.
But again, another excuse, another reason for Robert to, indulge in his excesses.
So do you think, could Ned as Hand summon Stannis to the council? How much power does he have as Hand? Can he demand Stannis show up? I feel he needs Stannis there,
Mm,
or at least like find out why aren't you here? Like why
yeah,
did you run back home with your tail between your legs?
yeah.
Like I feel like he's already shown that he's not going to be very impactful as a hand. He's not going to be very influential.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be very influential. I mean, he struggled with the position of Warden of the North and Lord of Winterfell. He felt that he inherited that wrongly. So fitting right in as a competent hand, I don't think was ever really going to be on the cards for Ned. He feels even less at home in King's Landing than he does in Winterfell.
And lest we forget that, like, as Warden of the North, not that it's all his fault, but certainly the Night's Watch has dwindled to basically a bunch of rapers and thieves, which he would know about more than anyone else. So why wasn't he constantly appealing to Robert, especially for somebody who's so pessimistic? Winter's coming, winter's coming. Why wasn't he always appealing to Robert for more help for the Night's Watch? I mean, I would assume as Warden of the North, that would come under your remit almost to kind of act as a...
I mean,
maybe not.
Perhaps, I mean, you could take that further back to why didn't Benjen constantly appeal to his brother, who's Warden of the North, to like, please, brother, we must have more men at the wall. There's a serious and imminent threat.
And why didn't Mormont? Like, everybody knew Ned and Rob were best friends, right? So why not, like, constantly be just barraging Ned? You need to go see Robert. You need to go see Robert.
Well,
so
there's
a disconnect there for some.
Supposed to get involved in the matters of the realm and politics, but still,
desperate times.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
I wonder, is it Ned removing himself from that relationship to try and remove suspicion from John, or to try and
maybe
leave no questions
about
John's paternity and maternity and all that kind of thing. There's Ned is again, like Cat, just a little bit naive. Cat completely thinks she knows who Littlefinger is, and Ned is the same with Robert. Like, do the Starks think that, like, time freezes and everybody stays the same? Luckily their children kind of don't do that. Yes.
I mean, I did think it was interesting that Ned was thinking about later on, I think in the chapter, that he was thinking about the dire wolves and the connection to the gods, like the old gods, I presume. And it's almost like he was making that connection that killing the dire wolves is like bad luck. They're the kind of sigil of the house, and having to have one killed couldn't be. I would imagine that that's probably bringing a whole heap of shit in terms of bad luck onto the entire family, really. It's interesting that we see Littlefinger immediately presenting himself to the reader as untrustworthy and manipulative. But I think it's also interesting, the quote where he says, "You're going the wrong way, Stark." Because Osha, the wildling, says that to Rob when he's going down south to avenge Ned later on. She says to Rob, you're riding the wrong way, and that they should be going the other way. They should be going up north. So that kind of mirrored that quote.
That's interesting about Littlefinger, because obviously then, like, he's in the brothel and nobody bats an eyelid when Ned comes into his brothel. It's like Littlefinger probably has the most powerful people in his pocket, basically, because he can bribe them, he can get all sorts of secrets through the prostitutes out of them. So yeah, instantly we're kind of like, oh, Ned, like, do you not see what's going on here?
Yes, complete nest of vipers, and he
Yeah.
does seem just so innocent. But I did think it was interesting where Ned was thinking about working with Littlefinger to find the truth. I mean, Littlefinger can lead him to wherever he wants to lead him, telling him things like, you want to be worrying about the Lannisters, and completely putting the spotlight on. He is extremely, he comes across and he's presented as manipulative, and then immediately he proves to the reader how manipulative he can be. But when Ned is thinking about working with Littlefinger to kind of uncover the truth, and he says it would not be the first time he'd been forced to make common cause with a man he despised. And I thought, who was the other man? Who was? So if it would not be the first time he'd been forced to make common cause with a man he despised. So it's like, So it sounds like Ned has had to be, I don't know, I'm hesitating to say dishonourable, but in order for him to get what he wanted, he had to kind of play with the devil a little bit in the past. And who could that have been, and what could that have led to? What were Ned's intentions? Very vague. I mean, this could be anything, anyone, any particular incident, but it was just interesting that for us as readers, and again, with you saying before, we double up a lot now on Ned's chapters, and this becomes very much, which is why it's such a shock at the end of the book, what happens to Ned. But we're kind of led as readers. I really do believe that this author, more than a few others in this genre, it's like you're hoodwinked into taking certain characters into your heart and feeling sympathetic or suspicious of certain characters. I've never ever questioned Cat before, because she was the mother figure, and it must have been horrible, all the things that happened to her and her children as the story progresses. But this reread particularly, I'm immediately suspicious, and I don't know why I haven't seen this before. Maybe it's just listening to years and years and years of YouTube theories about different characters, but it's just a different flavour this time for me with Cat. And
yeah, I feel that way about Cat and Ned though. Because as you're saying with Ned, we're hoodwinked in another way, because we're introduced to Ned through a 7-year-old, and we see him as being, everything he's saying makes sense, and he's an honourable guy, and he very strong sense of justice, comes across as being very wise and a good leader. But like with this first chapter in King's Landing, he's the dumbest person in the room. Like he is not the smartest person in the room, and I don't think he'll ever be the smartest person in the room. I'm trying to think. Maybe Robert, when Robert is around, Robert isn't particularly clever, but Robert is just so apathetic. I don't know if you can really say that. But for just the more I read Ned, the more I realize, God, he just wasn't that smart. And maybe it's like you said, maybe it's just because he never expected to have this role, that there seems to be a self-esteem issue there with Ned. But yeah, he's just, I think things move too quickly for him. And especially with Stannis already being gone, it seems like, I mean, it seems pretty obvious, even like through Tyrion. Obviously, Tyrion would know anyway out of years of seeing Jaime and Cersei together. And obviously we know through the Bran chapter, but it just seems so obvious now looking back that why wouldn't they be sleeping together? Like why would you think that? Like Robert rarely ever spends time with her, so I don't know. It just seems that I wonder, like, how long did it take Stannis to reach that conclusion once he started looking into it?
Yeah, but again, you could say with Stannis how he could have just been blinded by his own motivations for the whole, you know, the hierarchy with his brother and how he's been overlooked by Renly, and he didn't get Storm's End. He had to, you know, he ended up with Dragonstone, and the whole siege at Storm's End that he never got any kind of credit for or anything. There's something dodgy going on there. I'm sure there is.
But Ned never really, like,
he doesn't ask for him.
No,
Yeah,
he never, like, he makes the ultimate discovery with Robert's bastards and stuff, but like he never looks at people's motivations for doing anything. I feel like he doesn't really think about, like, in this chapter he begins by giving really specific instructions on how to deal with Arya, like how everybody should not let Arya go away, don't let her go away and explore. And then later on in Arya's chapter, he says, "Gosh, she's armed and I don't even know it." And
yeah,
there seems to, like, he knows himself that he's not smart enough for this position because he's not observant enough. Like, if that was somebody else, like if this was Tyrion, for instance, looking at this small council for the first time, he would already twig, okay, Littlefinger and Renly, clearly they've come up. Stannis isn't here. Stannis is making some sort of play. Stannis would only do that if it was beneficial to him. So I need to get to the bottom of that straight away. I need to summon him. But Ned goes in there on the back foot straight away and thinks, oh, these are all my equals. And they're not. You're the hand of the king. You're the one that should be, like, delivering summons and making them do what you want to do. Like, like there should be. He should have gone in there in a stronger position, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
But of course, he was dragged in there having just arrived, so probably doesn't have the energy mentally or physically to deal with it.
Yes, it was immediately. I mean, he'd literally just arrived in the capital and he was whisked off to the small council meeting. Yeah.
Maybe I'm too hard on Ned. I do think that he, as you said, he feels guilty about Sansa and Lady. But I'm not sure how much thought Ed really gives to Sansa. And I'll talk more about that when we get to the Arya chapter. But it is interesting that Littlefinger is the reason that the girls stay in King's Landing. Other than that, he could have sent them both back. And Robert wouldn't have argued.
No.
There wouldn't have been any argument at that stage. He could have saved himself potentially and the girls.
Yeah.
It could have maybe prevented what happened to him if he had sent the girls away. Perhaps. But I at this point I'm already asking, who do you think is the most successful, Littlefinger or Varys? And who do you think will be more successful in the end? Like, they're already been, so far we've only kind of seen them together, and we know that they're both really secretive and all that kind of thing. But
well, it seemed to be, they're presented as being kind of allied together at this point. They're passing information between each other. But then, of course, you've got to imagine that can only be to benefit, you know, each individual cause. I'm sure that Littlefinger wouldn't be passing information on to Varys just because he likes him or he thinks that, you know, he wants to be his friend. I think it's all very deliberate and carefully planned, the information that goes backwards and forwards between them. Everything is played like an intricate game of chess. Well, it's the Game of Thrones. And they're both heavily involved in the book. I mean, the only other thing that I've got really on this chapter is, that question. That's a big thing that came up for me, that who has Ned been forced to make common cause with before? With a man that he despised. Who would he have despised? Who do we know that?
Someone in Dorne?
Ned may have despised, possibly. So this has maybe got something to do with the Tower of Joy and everything that happened with Lyanna. He was forced to make common cause with a man that he despised.
I mean, it's
I just can't
hardly
think of.
Rhaegar, because he doesn't despise Rhaegar. Like, we never get that impression.
I wonder if this is something to do with the Boltons or
Greyjoys.
one of his bannermen, or yeah. It's just interesting that jumped out at me. It's like, who could that have been?
Dane.
Ned tells Cat when he sees her to go back to Winterfell and strengthen the north defences, so to strengthen the like Moat Cailin area, and she just completely, she never gets back to she doesn't go back to Winterfell, and she doesn't strengthen the North's defences. So she doesn't do anything that her husband tells her to do, basically.
No. Because it's the Tully family first, not the Stark.
Yes, yeah. Because again, maybe it could, go against her mission and family duty, honor, Tully mission. Don't mention the mission to anyone. That's the honor, going back to her family. But I suppose my question really is, who did, with this mystery that we've got in this chapter? The reason that Cat's
would it be Tywin? Because he would have had to make common cause on Robert's side with the Lannisters, even though he despises them. Tywin, Jaime, maybe.
Did he even have cause to despise them, though? At that point?
Well, I mean, I don't think Ned would. I think Tywin's treatment of the Rains would instantly make Ned despise him.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's interesting. Maybe there's something else. I mean, the way he says it, he may have done it even more than once. Just because he said it isn't the first time doesn't mean it's the second time.
I wonder if if he seemed to despise Robert when Robert was talking about the dragon spawn. So maybe he was forced to make common cause with Robert.
Maybe.
I mean, it could be. But the question that I've got, really, that I was kind of pondering at the end of this chapter is, who did want to kill Bran? And why did they want to kill Bran? And it seems to be coinciding. The whole timing of this happening with Bran seems to coincide with the opening of his third eye. And I just think, I wonder if somebody knew that was happening, and outside of like just what's happening day to day with the political stuff in the realm, maybe this assassin was sent from this sort of dark forces of magic, knowing that Bran was about to kind of awaken into this magical oracle, and they were trying to cut him down quickly before that happened.
I do like the way Ned says that he doubted Robert had any involvement in it, but I know that most people accept that it's Joffrey that actually has, with a little help from Littlefinger, that has Bran, that has the attempt on it to try and impress Robert in some way. I don't know about that, though. Does Joffrey really care?
Exactly. It just doesn't seem. It just doesn't seem. It doesn't sit well with me. I think that's still a mystery to be solved, to be honest with you. But
I agree. I mean,
I just thought it was coincidental that the timing of this incident taking place, this attempt on Bran's life, was at exactly the same time that he had this magical awakening, and maybe what they were doing, whoever it was trying to prevent that from ever happening, and they didn't make it.
I think most people just accept it as Joffrey, but I'm not sure about that one.
One to come back to, I think.
Definitely, for sure. Okay, so we're moving on to Tyrion. I know neither of us have much to say about Tyrion 3, which is chapter 21. Tyrion is in his last few hours at the Wall, and he meets Mormont, Lord Commander Mormont, who we get a much greater description of, and we get a very urgent sense that the wall is in trouble, the Night's Watch is in trouble, and it's starting to make more sense when you hear that Jon has pretty much a tower to himself almost, or like a section of a tower to himself to sleep in. Anyone can sleep there. I feel like Tyrion scoffs a lot in this chapter, but he's asked to communicate the weaknesses of the wall to the knights, to the king and to his father, which I thought was interesting. Like, if you can't make the king understand, that's all right. Everybody knows that Tywin Lannister is actually the one you need to convince. Which, you know, for the second chapter in a row, this is the message that we're getting. So the reader is already savvy and knows that that's obviously true. And he says goodbye to the wall and Jon, and they have this little friendship moment. The big thing for me in this chapter is the magical elements that are hinted at in this chapter. As he's going to bed, he remembers that he hopes that his who is it? Anyway, his servant has warmed up his bed and has the fire lit and all that kind of thing. But as he's thinking that, he realizes that Mormont doesn't have a fire lighting in his room, and he thinks, that means he's smarter than me. And I just wonder, why did he automatically think that? Well, obviously it's because Mormont doesn't want any fire to recognize him. And if we think back to the wildlings who were attacked, that Royce and them found in the prologue, they seem to have been sitting beside a fire. So does that draw unwanted attention? And Tyrion thinks that, and he goes up on top of the wall to have a last look, and he says that the tree line, the darkness of the trees, almost make a second wall to meet the wall, which I loved. And talks about the encroaching trees, but how the Night's Watch have been taking the axe to the trees, and it's almost like there's a mini battle there between this unnatural wall and the natural trees outside. But that's all I pretty much got from this. Did you get anything more? It just cut out again. We're back.
Yeah, that's weird. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, it was interesting you say that, because there are theories that there is or was more than one wall. You know, the vows, it's watcher on the walls rather than just the wall. So I don't know, maybe the line of trees was outlining where a previous wall used to be, and maybe there was another battle at some point in the past. I thought that this is well, just a couple of things really to mention on this chapter. It was the second time that Tyrion has been referred to as a giant, this time by Maester Aemon.
Another tower.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that the old bear seems to already be thinking about a successor. He's talking about the future and the future of the wall, and it feels like he's already thinking about who's going to take his place. And I just made a note that Benjen was out looking for Royce, because I didn't pick up on that. I didn't realize that that's why he went out on his ranging. I wasn't quite sure what the mission was, but he went to look for Royce and to find out what was happening. Yeah, I think this is the chapter where Jon asks Tyrion to do like a favor for Bran, and it just made me smile, because I thought, well, you know, out of all of the Lannisters, it seems like Tyrion is the Lannister who does pay his debts, because he had the hospitality of the Night's Watch. And you know, one of them has asked him for a favor back for that, you know, for that hospitality. I guess he could look at it that way, and he honors that. He does honor that request. So in a way, that's a Lannister paying his debt.
Yeah, and it seems that Tyrion and the Lord Commander they're warning each other about things that the other doesn't take seriously. So Mormont is warning Tyrion, you know, we're really desperate here. You know, I need a really good Lord Commander to take over. We need more men. We don't have enough here. But Tyrion at the same time obviously has grown close to, you know, the best new recruit, which is Jon. But at the same time, he warns Mormont about promoting somebody like Sir Alistair. He doesn't trust him at all. And he says you shouldn't put too much store in that guy. Like he's not a good guy. And it's interesting that they both have really valid points. We also get a bit of talk here about White Walkers and others, and that Mormont takes it a lot more seriously than anyone else does. And Tyrion says as he's rising and looking out over the wall that he definitely feels that. Jon doesn't so much, though. I feel like Jon doesn't really see that threat out there.
No.
Very self-involved.
I think he's just he's focused a lot more on the other boys of his age and how he's going to fit in, and I don't think he's got really any kind of sense of what's beyond the wall. It's just he's being asked to take the watch and be on duty, and that's his job. I don't think he's seen beyond that yet.
So what do you think of the idea that the wall itself has weirwood trees inside it? I think this is something that you buy, right? So do you think that the weirwood trees are almost making a second wall that is going to be even more protected, or that doesn't need men, or something like that? This wall of trees, the haunted forest, or is it against the Night's Watch?
I'm a believer that it's not men who built the wall, that it was from the other side, that it was built to keep men out rather than the opposite way around. And it wouldn't surprise me if there are weirwood trees. There are human sentinels inside the wall. There's that tale of the farmer whose sons joined the Night's Watch and they deserted, and he basically dobbed them in and then killed himself. And they're locked inside the ice, inside the wall, facing outwards, so that they can, like, you know, they're always on duty kind of thing, even in death. So I think that the wall, I mean, it's been described as being made with magic, and there are spells woven into the ice. I think there potentially could have been another wall, and that it was a kind of row of sentinel weirwood trees. It's difficult to tell.
Like the trees are fighting back.
Yes, yeah. So nature versus something that is a structure that's been
and doesn't
built rather than grown.
Yeah, like Royce has been mentioned in both this chapter and Jon's chapter. Again, why did he join the Night's Watch? How did they attract somebody like Royce? Like, that's a massive question for me, which is just kind of really bugging me now since we started this reread.
Wasn't he like a third son? And there was an expectation that third sons wouldn't inherit the title of the Lord of the Castle.
Why is there more of him up there? Why aren't there more third sons of mighty houses?
Yeah, that's true. And Royce was it's one of the oldest houses, isn't it? It's an ancient First Men house, or First Men rather than Andals, I think.
I know they're a very proud family for sure when we meet Royce later on, but yeah, it's one of those things. It's like, why? How can you attract somebody like they can't be the only family that have this tradition, you know? I mean, Benjen went to the wall. Again, we don't know why, but Benjen went to the wall, but that was many years ago in comparison to Royce. We should have a steady flow of these type of these type like of upper class kind of guys coming to the wall, but we just don't. And yeah, it just, even when there's a joke about Tyrion joining the wall or joining the Night's Watch, you know, which, you know, we'll get that with Sam later as well. But yeah, it's one of those things. Why isn't there more Royce, and did Royce have to go, and why? And yeah, it's just,
well, with Sam, it's that kind of, he's from a noble family, but it's that it's the wall or death.
well, yeah, and with Sam, it's like his father is trying to turn him into the second son.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, would it have been the case that Rickon would have been encouraged to go to the wall? Would Ned have sent Rickon to the wall if Bran was going to become the Knight and Robb was going to be Lord of Winterfell? Like, is that the way it always is? It's just, there's a lot of questions there about the state of the Night's Watch. How has the kingdom let it get to this stage? How has somebody like Mormont, like, he clearly like went off and had his own family and then joined the Night's Watch. Why don't more men do that? Yeah, there's a lot of questions in how it's kind of gotten to this point, and why doesn't Mormont like regularly leave and just like do like recruitment drives himself? Like, he sounds like a really knowledgeable guy that could get people up to the wall, and, you know, if he really wanted to. But yeah, there's a lot more questions than.
Well, I think there's also, you either fall on the side of the Night's Watch is full of rapers and thieves and a horrible place to be, or you fall on the side of this is a noble profession, an old noble way to commit your life to, you know, dedicating your life to protecting the realm. And maybe there are certain houses that fall one way or the other on either side. Mormon, I would imagine, would be very much, as we see the Old Bear is, you know, it's all about tradition and honor, and that this is a noble thing to do. But it is interesting. There is, I'm sure that there is somewhere in the book some reference to third sons being. So
that would mean
the ones that tend to take up. Potentially, yeah. Maybe.
And another question: if he's that desperate for men, why not accept his own son, regardless of the dishonor he's caused his family? Why not insist that his own son be sent to the wall? Because the question's always, or with Jorah, it's always been, oh no, Jorah was going to be executed. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, would he?
Yeah, there was no other option.
Yeah. Like, surely, so you'd need someone like Jorah up at the wall. He'd be amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd still think that's where
there needs to be like
some sort of. And the end, if there is a wall.
Whether or not to bring even that option, that choice, seems to be. There doesn't seem to be a clear-cut trigger for it. Oh, you've done this, right? Well, either that, or you join the wall, or oh, you fathered a bastard, and you know, or oh, you're a third son, and there's nowhere else for you to go apart from be, you know, you're going to be honourable by representing our house at the wall. There is no rhyme or reason to it, really, and it just seems to have fallen into this. Into having a really bad press, and it's just the way that Tyrion initially described to Jon. It's not a very pleasant place to be. It's like going away and doing hard labor.
So here's another question: how does Tyrion know that? Like, I mean, presumably not that many people not that many Night's Watch members ever get to travel south to spread the stories about how bad the wall is.
Maybe it's because he knows from being in King's Landing that any recruitment drives take their recruits from the dungeons.
And obviously, if it was really prestigious, Tywin would be making some kind of money up there doing something.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And it's quite interesting that we go from like this conversation about, you know, the prestige and the kind of traditional roles that people have, especially like third stones and stuff, into Arya's chapter, where it's definitely about somebody breaking the mold. And I feel like of all of our characters, that's what Arya's whole arc is about, her breaking the mold. So yeah, so unless you have anything else on Tyrion, will we move into Arya too?
Yeah, that's fine.
I was kind of surprised. I had to check. I was like, did I make a mistake? Is it really only Arya 2? So far, we're 22 chapters in, and this is only our second. Her chapters are so rich.
Yes.
And there's so few of them, but you just get such an insight into the character. Like, I feel we don't get into other characters. She's such a child, but but she's just so naturally a child. He's written her so well, and she's full of guilt and hate in this chapter, and she can't make sense of those emotions. And she has a massive fight and slams the door, and nobody can get through this door, not even the Hound. But of course, when Ned shows up, she instantly jumps up and opens the door. And yeah, she has this lovely heart-to-heart with Ned, and then starts her dancing lessons.
Yes.
So, what did you take from Arya 2?
Oh, there's lots of quotable quotes in this chapter. I thought it was quite sad that Ned reflects on Arya's relationship with Sansa, and he just kind of says, you can almost see him shrugging his shoulders and sighing and saying, I expect you to act like sisters. But I think that's sort of foreshadowing as well for much later on down the line. I think there's lots of foreshadowing in Arya's chapters. Like you say, they're rich, and you can go back to them. I have read Arya's chapters in sequence to get a good feel of when I did it. It was about 3 years ago now, but the Mercy chapter that we did an analysis of, I went right back and read through all of Arya's chapters in sequence, and it is interesting. Actually, you get a good sense of her character, and I think there is a lot of foreshadowing in all of the text in Arya's chapters, especially these early ones. So Ned is talking about, he's saying to her that he's talking about having the wolf blood, and that essentially means that if you have the wolf blood, that you die before your time. Lyanna had a touch of wolf blood. Brandon had a touch. So the Stark siblings who display the wolf blood and the wild wolf are the ones that always die early before their time. And then you immediately start searching, like, who could that be in the current Stark siblings? Does this mean that Arya is going to die before her time? He talks about her. He says, like you say, she's lots of emotions that she's finding very difficult to control, and her father says to her, "Hate those who would truly do us harm," which makes me think. I mean, there's elements of foreshadowing, and there's elements of how is this shaping the sisters. These early chapters with Ned and the interactions between the daughters and the father, how does this shape their stories later on? Because she develops a list of people who she truly hates, who she feels would do her harm. But I think she makes some mistakes as well later on. There's names that she could knock off that list, and she seems to make some really strange decisions, like when she's at Harrenhal and things like that. She makes it quite clear that she does not want to be a lady, so we get a good impression of Arya as this rough and tumble tomboy. Again, having the wolf blood. In this chapter, Ned says the infamous line that the lone wolf dies and the pack survives. So again, he's warning her, if you've got wolf blood, you die before your time. If you go out on your own and you have all these wild adventures, you lose touch with your pack. And if you're a lone wolf, then you won't survive. So he's given her all these warnings. He also, this chapter is the first comparison between Arya and Lyanna. This is quite interesting. I thought that when Ned was talking about Nymeria and she was saying, you know, about when it all happened on the road, and Arya was saying that Joffrey lied, and that Sansa was saying that she couldn't remember, you know, she was just horrified at how Joffrey and Sansa reacted. And they're talking about lying, and Ned says regarding Nymeria, even the lie was not without honor, which I've put a note here, but it's like, okay, Ned, so you can lie and be honorable at the same time, which again is quite interesting. The first time that I've actually belly laughed throughout this reread is on the line where he says, they're talking about Needle, and he says, if I hid it, no doubt I'd find a morning star under your pillow the next day, which just made me roar with laughter. And I've just got the observation with the meeting of Syrio. I'm sure that we're both going to ask these questions. Who is Syrio? Where did he come from? How did Ned find him? How did he just suddenly appear? And also the fact that he immediately refers to Arya as boy. Arya's left-handed, but Syrio points out that Arya's deficiencies, like being left-handed and being skinny, she could actually turn around to her advantage, which again, from the reader's point of view, immediately puts her in the kind of hero position of, you know, you're not a classic warrior or fighter or hero, but you can be because you can listen to this new dancing master and he'll tell you how to make what you think your weaknesses are into your strengths, which I thought was very interesting. And just going back to Needle actually itself, Needle, Ned describes as a Bravos blade. So again, we get that connection with Bravos, but how did that happen? How did John get Needle? I mean, I imagine that he had it made.
It was forged in Winterfell.
In Winterfell, but
yeah, but it must be the type, the style of blade,
right? Rather than the steel that's used,
rather than a massive sword like the Westerosi would use.
Yeah.
Why Tyrion Syrio Farrell is that he was already reserved and booked for Bran.
Okay. Well, that kind of makes sense.
That might be why he keeps, or one of the reasons why he keeps saying boy. But I think he was booked for Bran because Bran was supposed to go to King's Landing. So I've got the message in time, stop the journey there, or whatever.
That definitely makes sense. Yeah. And that's really all I've got for.
Yeah, I pretty much would have pointed out everything you said as well. My only thing here is the disadvantage Sansa seems to be at in not getting the same kind of guidance from Ned that Arya is getting here. And I wonder, he tells Arya, he's very honest with her considering she's what, 9? Is she 9? He's very honest telling her we've come to a dark and dangerous place where people wish to do us harm. Have you said that to Sansa? Have you hammered that home with Sansa? Because just, I don't think she's getting that because she doesn't have Lady around anymore. I don't think she's getting, there's no dog growling at people that should be, that she shouldn't trust or anything like that. So I wonder, is Ned doing himself a disservice, and obviously Sansa a disservice, by not preparing her in the same ways that he's preparing Arya?
This could just be Ned's intellectual shortcomings again, where he may just think, oh, Sansa I don't need to worry about because she's going to marry Joffrey and she'll be the queen. So,
or it could be like he overestimates Kat's ability to go and hold the north for him. He sees much of Tully in Sansa that he he feels that they are intellectually and I don't know, socially more adept socially more adept than he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's I kind of, as he's talking to Arya in this, I keep going, oh, what about Sansa? There's no
Yeah.
one helping Sansa here, because Sansa
Yeah.
gets a lot of hate, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think many people would act differently to Sansa, because she's in like puberty.
Yeah.
Arya has the ability; she can still be rebellious, because she doesn't really have the same kind of expectations on her shoulders that Sansa does.
Mm.
But yeah, that was it. The the thing that makes me uncomfortable with the Syria Pharrell scene is that he tells, every man is the same. When you poke him or stab him, water comes out. And it's this kind of dehumanizing of death and violence, I feel. It's already kind of taking the humanity out of death for
Mm.
Arya. So that kind of gives me the creeps a little bit.
Yeah.
Just the
Yeah.
water reference. But yeah, that's all I took from the Arya thing. It's a lovely scene though with Ned, and one that I wish we got with John as well,
Mm-hmm.
because John is the
Yeah.
elephant in the room in that scene for sure. Yeah, so then we're on to Dany 3. This is, I feel like this is sometimes a controversial chapter as well, for Dany, leading on from Dany 2. And this is chapter 23. She is loving her new role as Khaleesi, doesn't really think
Mm-hmm.
of herself as queen. And it's all about her taking back control, especially with Viserys and then Drogo. I have a lot of questions regarding magic here in this chapter, so I'm going to
Yeah.
get you to talk about that a little bit maybe as well. And the big thing, of course, in this chapter is that Dany gets pregnant. But
Yeah.
that's where my questions come in. So what were your thoughts on this chapter?
Okay, I think I've probably got the same sort of thoughts as you. She's very defiant. So she's the thing with Viserys, and already in the 3rd chapter. So I seem to feel when I've done rereads before that it takes Dany quite a while, almost right up until her brother's demise, that she gets confident. But she's quite confident early on. She's really quite confident, a lot earlier than I seem to remember. Feeling very regal, very entitled. Previous chapters, she's convincing herself and doing all this kind of self-motivation about being blood of the dragon and Targaryen. Right at the very beginning of this chapter, when there's a description of the grass and the different grasses, and the ghost grass as being the grass that kills all other grasses, and it's white and it's almost this ethereal property that just makes, to me, it sounds like something that's kind of like come across from the land of always winter. So it sounds like something that's kind of ice magic almost, this ghost grass. It's, I think what you referring to is the dragon dream that Daenerys has, where she dreams of this black and red dragon and that it's fire cleansing her and strengthening her. I think that this is her feeling the feeling that she's pregnant, and that's why at the end of the chapter one of her handmaids says, "Oh, you with child?" And she says, "Yeah, I know." I think she knew that when she had the dream of the dragon, and I think that waking the dragon has a very different meaning now in Dany's mind. I mean, she says things like, it's almost like this awakening of, well, yeah, my brother's been telling me this all my life, and I don't know why I didn't really question it before, but now I know that he was never going to be king. He's never going to rule the 7 kingdoms. She basically completely defies her brother. And she's even, Marwyn, I'll have to go in 1 second just to clear something up.
Oh no.
Yeah. yeah, asleep. Waking the dragon and eggs and dragon eggs linked to fertility, and waking the dragon, I think, is about Dany's sense of herself rather than this reference that Viserys has of "don't wake the dragon because you'll make me angry and I've got dragon blood." I think it's a completely different meaning, and I think Daenerys is beginning to get her head around that now. Just a couple of things before I go and clear this up is that, yeah, so her fear is gone completely. She sees her brother now as pitiful rather than something to be fearful of. I thought that it was a little bit creepy that Jorah refers to her as child. A few times he refers to her as child.
Knowing what she's going through on a nightly basis.
Yeah. I'll be back in a second.
No problem. And while Claire is dealing with Marwan, I think for those people that don't like Dany chapters or that have a problem with Dany, need to read this chapter in particular, because it's amazing how much difficulty Dany faces, but she has to rally herself in so many ways that other people in the books just don't have to do. So I would recommend reading this chapter again, looking at the physical, emotional, and psychological pain she's in. She's borderline suicidal. She says she will kill herself if this continues. But after that dream, she kind of pulls herself together, and she really does have to do that. But even before that, she's kind of recognizing the advantages of being married to someone like Drogo, and really getting into like the smell of the leather and the dirt in her hair and the riding of the horse and all that kind of thing. And she says that she never felt like a princess before she got married, but she felt like a princess on her horse. And I feel like she felt like a princess on her horse, but she will feel like a queen on a dragon. And so that's why we get so many more references to dragons in this chapter. And the pain that comes with riding the horse, it's a pain that it's a good hurt, like she used to describe certain other things. Kat used to describe sex with Ned. But Dany, it's a hurt, it's a pain that's worth having. For Dany, something isn't worth it if it isn't painful. If it isn't difficult, she doesn't want it. It has to be difficult. She's not going to take the easy way out. And that's why she agrees with Jorah when he says that Viserys would never be a good king. And would you ever want Viserys to be king? And she kind of thinks, yeah, actually, no, you wouldn't. And I kind of have known that for a while. And of course, riding dragons later on will be painful. That's not going to be an easy thing to do. It does burn. It isn't very comfortable. She'll love it, but it is, it is painful. Yeah, the idea of home and Westeros being home kind of confused me a little bit. But there's Claire cleaning up. Yeah, so I'll discuss that a little bit more with Claire when she comes back. The ghost grass, it is interesting that it opens with the ghost grass. I do think the ghost grass is the other threat for Essos. So I think the Dothraki would probably deal with the threat of the others, the creatures, in a better way than Westerosi people would. But the threat of ghost grass would be much more detrimental to the Dothraki. So I think that's why they have the ghost grass, but the Westerosi have the others, the creatures. It's just easier to send the ghost grass east, because it'll take out your biggest enemy, which will be the Dothraki. Yeah, I think Dany, what I really like about the chapter as well, that even when she is going through this very, very difficult painful nightly conjugal with Drogo, she still recognizes that he is presenting the world to her anew every day and putting her front and center so that she gets to see everything unspoiled. And that's before Viserys, before him, before anyone else. Dany is he is presenting the world to her. So he's a bit gruff, and she doesn't automatically give in to subservient role. She tries to find another way to it. And I'm not sure, Claire's back now. I'm not sure, Claire, if this is where I'm confused, because you said that when she has the dragon dream, this is kind of her conception of Drogo's child. But I'm not sure it might be a chicken and egg thing, but I'm not sure if it's because she's having this dream that's then what kind of gives her the confidence to make sure she conceives his child. Because let's face it, if it's anal all the time, it's not necessarily going to happen. So she needs to switch it up. The confusing thing about Dany's chapters, and it is something that if you're reading the books for the first time, it can be confusing. Dany's chapters move much faster than everybody else's chapters in terms of time. So that chapter could have taken place over months, and probably did. So from the discovery of the pregnancy at the end of the chapter, from the dream that she has, it could have been a few months. So this is my question with Dany. Is Dany the impetus that brings magic into the world, or is it her blossoming as a young woman, her coming of age? Is it her fertility almost, or is it her new queenship? Like, what is it is it all of these things coming together, the red comets, all that kind of thing later on? I feel like Dany is a large part of the reason why we're having magic come into the world. And I kind of want it to be her and not her pregnancy, if that makes sense. I feel like if it's her dragon dream that changes everything, that's much more of her changing her own destiny and grabbing life by the horns, because the dragon, she is suicidal before that, and she says she's going to kill herself. But it's almost like when Viserys is constantly threatening her with waking the dragon, she almost unconsciously or subconsciously wakes the dragon in herself, and that's what gives her the impetus to have okay.
That makes sense. I think I think Dany is a perfect kind of magical conduit if you look at the two of them together, Viserys and Daenerys. She is first of all, she's got these magical things that belong to her now. These dragon eggs belong to her. She's just turned 14. I don't know if that's some sort of magical event, possibly. I think the fact that she felt stronger the next day after this dream where the fire, seemed as though she was just kind of standing there and letting the fire from the dragon fire just burn her and cleanse her and strengthen her. And when she gets up the next day, everything seems a lot easier. So it's almost like what she was complaining about previously just seems trivial now. It's not the same because she's got this extra strength. And I think, yeah, you're right. That makes sense that I think what waking the dragon isn't what we know so far, as in, don't annoy Viserys because that means that he's got a bad temper. You'll wake the dragon. That's not what it is. That's not what it does. And I think, I don't think Viserys has dragon dreams.
No.
I don't think that he's extremely insecure, and he takes it. I mean, just the fact that he sort of put his hand under a vest and squeezed a nipple, squeezed a breast, and it was just like such a horrible, nasty, horrible thing to do. But that comes rooted in his insecurities and being, chased throughout Essos by, by
he's
the...
still a nasty shit, though.
He's horrible. He's absolutely horrible. But she sees it this time. She sees for the first time. I mean, she's observed it in previous chapters at the wedding, but this is when she kind of verbalizes it to herself, that she actually feels pity for Viserys. I mean, she's still a little bit concerned about him, like, oh my God, he really does have to walk behind the Khalasar and find his way back to camp somehow. And Jorah reassures her that he will, and if he doesn't, then he'll be found anyway, so he'll be safe, he's not going to die. But I think she's just... I remember reading the books for the first time and feeling shocked at the whole thing that we'll get to with Viserys, that happens with him when they reach Vaes Dothrak, and just how cold she is in the moment. But now I'm not surprised, going back and reading through this text and dialogue and putting yourself in Daenerys' mind and her point of view. She just thinks he's a clown at this point.
And he's a liability.
Yeah.
Massive liability.
Yeah.
And also Jorah is the one to say, do you ever think he'd be a good king? He'd be a terrible king. But I also think, I kind of, leading on again from the Arya chapter, where we've got the wolf blood into the dragon blood, and Arya is being led by Ned, the alpha wolf at the moment, that in the books, to be her own type of woman. And I feel like Dany isn't defined through her motherhood of humans. She's defined, I think here she finds herself as a woman first, before she then will go on to define herself as mother of dragons. But I think it's really, really important, that dream, that she's almost washing herself, like you said, cleansing herself in the fire first. It's like, this is her baptism of fire. Everything she's going through. And I was saying there, as you were dealing with Marwan's surprise, that, for Dany, the whole way through this series, and people like to bash on Dany as well, I feel for Dany, unlike Jon actually, Dany doesn't think anything is worth it unless it's painful. It has to be painful for it to be meaningful and worthwhile, because the opposite is Viserys, who wants everything to be comfortable and easy. Dany, like, she's dirty, it's really painful to ride the horse all day, it's really painful to be Drogo's wife, it's really uncomfortable to do most things, but she didn't feel like a princess until she was on the horse. She won't feel like a princess or like a queen until she's on a dragon, and that both those things are painful to do. It's not easy riding a dragon. It's hot and sticky and not easy at all. So I feel like Dany is she doesn't complain like Jon does. Like she tries to she acknowledges the pain, but she doesn't complain about it. I feel she's ready to meet it head on and do something in order to change it herself. Now she's in a position to do that where Jon isn't, of course, but even Arya is another one that'll embrace the pain and the difficulty, like with at the end of that chapter as well. But the eggs start to warm up as well, and then we find out that she's pregnant. And looking back on it now, it feels like that baby could never have been born anyway. I mean, it is about the eggs warming up. It's not about her womb warming up. It's about the eggs warming up. Yeah. Like, it's not really about that, but that there is a sort of blood magic happening here with that. That all these things need to align.
It's kind of like the end of the chapter. It's like, oh, Khaleesi, you're pregnant, and it's like, yeah, we're going to have some baby dragons. So it's that whole mother of dragons thing, which we hate so much, but you can see where it came from.
And then we move on to Bran 4, which is our last chapter this evening, chapter 24. And I know that this is going to be a chapter you'll have lots to say about. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this, actually. I don't have a huge amount to say about this. But it starts with old Nan telling stories. Well, it actually starts with Bran wishing he was down with Rickon and all the wolves and everything. And but it's really about old Nan's stories at the beginning and the stories of the long night. And then we have Tyrion visiting, and then we get news of Benjen, bad news for Bran and Rob. I really forgot his name there. About Benjen. And yeah, Rob shown himself to be not as in control as other people see him. It's always through Bran we see Rob as being like, you know, quite innocent. But yeah, I don't really have a huge lot to say, except, you know, we do find out, or Bran does believe that Summer is the smartest wolf, which maybe some foreshadowing there. And also he's turned 8, so we have another birthday here.
Yeah.
And he sees himself as almost a man grown at 8. And yeah, he says that or Nan, he says he regrets listening to the crow, in reference to opening his third eye and not looking back and all that kind of thing. But that Nan tells him crows are all liars. And I wondered, did that have something to do with the Night's Watch? Not sure. And she also says that these stories are not her stories, these stories are, which kind of introduces this kind of mixing of timelines that we're going to get with Bran.
Yeah.
So what I'm sure there's lots you have here. So
this is the introduction to Old Nan's stories, and I thought it was quite interesting at the beginning of the chapter that Bran, who clearly had quite an affectionate, fond relationship with Old Nan prior to this incident, and he talks about this later on when he's on his travels, about, and Mira asks him to remember about what Old Nan was saying. But he seems to take a complete dislike to her here. He describes her as old and vile to look at, which and he also acknowledges that that's a horrible thing for him to think about. He just doesn't want to hear Old Nan's stories anymore at this point. And I'm thinking that is because he's being manipulated by the three-eyed raven already. And I don't know what he knows himself at this point. I mean, if he thinks he's a man grown already because he's 8, maybe that's because there's some leverage perhaps to this kind of time traveling thing with Bran. But I thought it was interesting that he didn't refuse to want to. He took a huge dislike to Old Nan and didn't want to hear any of her stories. And I think that's more than just us as readers going, no, let's hear what she has to say. Let's hear what she has to say. I think that's, I don't want to hear you saying that crows are liars, and I don't want to hear your version of what history actually is. I've had this awakening. I'm old. Nope. Hello. Hi. Don't know why it keeps doing that, but yeah, I think he's thinking, you know, he's older now because he's had this enlightened kind of awakening. But I do think that the communication, what he hears and what he believes and what he feels is happening around this magical element is still confusing to him. Right at the very end of the chapter, when he's dreaming about climbing again and he says, I didn't hear, I didn't hear, I didn't hear. He repeats this a few times. And I think that's kind of, there are messages coming through. He doesn't know what he needs to focus on or what he wants to hear. Is he listening to this man who pushes him over, or is he listening to this crow telling him that he can fly and that he's doing it, and now this is happening, so this awakening? But I just thought it was very interesting that he just refused. There was this immediate kind of like, yeah, I used to listen to you and you listen to your stories and find them interesting, but now I just see this, I see you in a completely different light. I think that that's not Bran. I think that's somebody else, or at least a Bran that's been through some kind of magical awakening, whether he realizes it or not. The thing that I mentioned to you about a potential theory is there's a quote here where Bran's thinking about his dreams, and he's thinking perhaps he died, perhaps Bran died. That's the quote that I've got here, and maybe he did. Maybe Bran died in the fall, and the three-eyed crow, through this magical connection, reanimated him. So I had that thought in mind as I'm reading through it, and then the next bit is you get a bit more of a reveal about old Nan and who she is and her stories, and that she's Hodor's great grandmother, and that she's been there for time, and she's been nursemaid to several Brandons, so much so that they all seem to merge into one. Now, this is a very easy observation to make if there's somebody that's so old that she could be the oldest person alive, the oldest person in the realm. She's been through several Brandons, and Brandon is a popular name of boys in the family. But Brandon's also seem to die early. She originally came to be a wet nurse for a Brandon, but that particular Brandon died when he was 3. We don't know why or how, but this is another Brandon who died young. And my beginnings of a kernel of a theory is Bran died in that fall, or he died during what we are seeing as the recovery period with Cat in the room with him, where she's feeding him water and lemons. And I think he actually died, but he was reanimated magically through the three-eyed crow. And I think if you go back to what George R.R. Martin said before the last TV series, where he was talking about Beric as being a fire white, and we know that the Night's King reanimates dead things, and there are ice whites. So there are ice whites, there are fire whites. You could argue that Patchface is like a water white. He's somehow been reanimated. Maybe this is an example of different elements of magic, depending on your flavor of magic, whether it's ice magic, water magic, fire magic, old magic like the earth. So this could be another aspect of, I think in this realm, all magic is capable of reanimating life. But I think it happens in different ways. I think it happens differently with fire, and I think the effect of that is different to a different extent depending on the magic. So with ice whites, they're completely no sentience there. They're just zombies essentially. With fire whites, there seems to be some semblance of kind of sentience, but that fades after a while. Patchface is just talks complete nonsense. So there's some semblance of something there, but it's like it's not in the right order. It's like somebody's poured a jug of water into a filing cabinet and it's just all the words are mixed up everywhere. And then you have potentially like the equivalent of like earth whites or earth magic or old magic, like the Children of the Forest type of magic. So in a roundabout way, what I'm saying yet again is Bran, I think, potentially could have died from that fall. I think that he was reanimated by this type of magic, which in this case is the old gods and the three-eyed crow. And I think that potentially could explain why there have been so many Brandons, why they all seem to have come to an early demise at an early age. And it also explains things, legendary Brans like Bran the Builder, how he managed to live for so, you know, like the stories of Bran the Builder seem to span 6 generations as if he lived forever. And it's like, how could that have happened? And well, I suppose it could have happened if he was if he died and then was reanimated and went on to live, I mean, you know, I'm not saying that they're all the same person and they're all the same Brandon. I think there have been several different Brandons, but I think also that some of them died when they were young and were reanimated by the old god's magic.
Do you think it's some sort of like magical consciousness parasite almost?
Yeah, and it manifests itself differently depending on the type of magic or what magic is used to bring them back.
Like the White Walkers seem to completely take over. Like there's nothing left of the former person. Fire magic eats it away like bit by bit, depending on how much you come back. But maybe this type of magic, it's more like it kind of bit by bit replaces you with another consciousness.
Yes.
Because Bran will become the three-eyed raven, so like
he seems to have forgotten who Bran was already, because Bran that we know was a young boy who used to enjoy old Nan stories and was comfortable and familiar with this old lady.
And even
telling
the way
him
he
stories.
says he thinks of himself as almost being a man grown.
Yeah.
Like he isn't.
Yeah. But, no. But he doesn't see himself as Bran anymore.
He has an old consciousness that he really is.
Yeah. Like, you've taken over.
I like that. I really like that theory, yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see. You know, who knows?
Well, that's the one thing that he's been very slow to give us much to go, like to give us much to go on. And he seems to be saying a little bit but more about it in interviews. So as we come to Winds of Winter, I'm sure we'll get a lot more answers for whites and what whites are across all sorts of magical, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway,
elements.
So, so or incarnations, like any kind of any kind of way we see it. I the only other thing I had for this chapter was that just the incident with Tyrion and how poorly behaved Robb Stark is to have his knife or his sword unsheathed. And just like it's a very cat move to make, to be so like
I mean
Ned
he has to be reined in by Lewin,
and Cat is way too off, like on her guard, and Robb seems to be going the Cat route, and that's not really good. Sansa will go more the Ned route, and then Arya will be somewhere in between.
He clearly doesn't. He needs a lot of guidance, and he needs Lewin to tell him, whoa, hang on a minute, this guy's here trying to help and he's doing a nice thing, and you sat here with your weapon and you direwolves, which equally as dangerous as weapons.
It also shows that Tyrion is potentially not as smart as we think he is, because he should have twigged straight away there's a problem here. And later on, when he meets Cat, he should just say, maybe it's not a good idea for me to say anything to her.
I mean, clearly he doesn't. I mean, he must feel under threat because he doesn't want to stick around.
And the wolves go for him as well.
Yeah. So it's, you know, he's not. If he was really silly, if he was really stupid, then he would be like, oh yeah, you know, I will take your hospitality and you know, have the run of Winterfell, because I'm sure he'd want to get into the library and read some of the books in Winterfell. But he's like, no, I'll.
But actually, the library burnt down. We don't get any mention of that for Tyrion.
Oh yeah.
Tyrion has some of the last books from the library with him.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he did. He took them.
Yeah, he has a book on dragons, right?
Yeah, I think
from the library.
I can't remember if it mentioned the titles of the books that he's got, but one of them was about dragon history, definitely. But again, just that thing I was saying before about Tyrion, it proving that at least one of the Lannisters pays his debts. So he's designed this saddle for Brandon on, and even Robb says, "Why are you doing this?" And he says, "Well, because you John asked me to do it." When you were mentioning before about Alistair Thorne, John making an enemy of Alistair Thorne immediately, and Yoren. I thought it was quite funny that Yoren refers to John as Thorne's Bane, Alistair Thorne's Bane.
Yeah.
And then I've got here just at the dinner when they have with Yoren, and they're talking about Benjen being gone and Rob not wanting to hear that he possibly could have died. And I think it's Bran. I should have written who said this, but the quote is, "The children of the forest will help him."
That's right. Bran says it. Yeah.
So I suppose that just raised a few questions for me. I wondered in the books, do the children of the forest help Benjen? How would Brandon know that? How would Bran know that? What made him even say that? And yeah, that just felt a little bit like foreshadowing to me. Bran saying the children of the forest will help him. Maybe they do, or maybe they did. I think
Bran, I mean, I feel like so many of the prophecies probably apply to lots of people anyway, but Bran could easily be our last hero as well, not just John, you know. With the horse and the dog and the companion.
Was talking about some of the history and the legends. So we hear her say things like, fear is for the winter and fear is for the long night, and she describes the long night as lasting a generation. She describes the White Walkers or the others as hating the sun, hating the living, having dead servants and having spiders as big as hounds. And then she talks about the last hero setting out with 12 companions. So again, this number 13, which there are several numbers that make a series of appearances, and 13 is one of them, 7 is another. But she says the last hero set out to find the children of the forest and the secret cities where the children of the forest live. So maybe Bran is the last hero, because that's what he seemed to set out to find, was the children of the forest, guided by really not very much apart from this half-baked dream trippy vision of the three-eyed crow pecking at his head.
Yeah, and I wonder, you see, this is where, like, this happens so many times in Game of Thrones. You kind of wished another person was there to kind of fill in the missing pieces. Like, how would that conversation have gone had Tyrion attended that dinner? Having got all of that information on the trees and his perspective of, you know, suddenly it's possible to believe these things exist when you're looking out over the wall. Just that physical reality that Tyrion has had with Bran's kind of childish kind of perception of how things might work. It would be interesting to see those two come together. But no.
Yeah, we don't get
unfortunately, Rob got in the way.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, so that's it for me. I don't have anything else to say. I want to apologize again, everybody, and also I just realized, based on a few emails that I just got, that I messed up my title and I said 23rd instead of 22nd. My head is all over the place. I was on holiday, so I apologize. So I'm so sorry if you missed this live. It will be Sundays from now on. I'm so sorry I said the wrong date last week. I'm an idiot. But yeah, is Sunday okay again for you next week, Claire? Is Sunday better for you?
Sunday's great for me. Yeah, it's like this kind of time is perfect.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the chapters that we're going to be looking at next week.
Yeah, we're going to read up to Arya 3, the end of Arya 3.
So there are 8 chapters, and of those 8 chapters, 3 of them are Ned chapters. So we're going to get a lot of action at King's Landing.
That's kind of going to be the pattern from now on. A lot more Ed heavy. I think there's one section where we have 4 Ed chapters. So the end of chapter 32, which is Arya 3. And yeah, so we'll be ending on an Arya chapter. It'll be nice to be back with Arya. Okay, so everybody, again, sorry about the mix-up. Please forgive us and come back. And we'll see you live next Sunday at 7 p.m. UK time. I think the clocks change next week, so just be careful of that. That's 7 p.m. UK time.
Oh,
don't they change next week?
They go back, don't they?
Yeah. So just make sure to change your clocks, but it'll still be 7 p.m. whenever 7 p.m. is in UK time. It'll change for you as well. So that'll be 8 p.m. for me and 7 p.m. for you. So enjoy the rest of your week, everybody. Thank you so much, Claire, for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Bye.